All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Agile Leaders, the skill mastery podcast, where we help you develop skills to advance as a leader through insights from accomplished leaders and operators. I'm your host, Evan Shai. Today, we are joined by Chike Aguh, a senior advisor at McChrystal Group and formerly served as Chief Innovation Officer at the U.S. Department of Labor. His work centers around the future of work, innovation, and social change. Thank you so much for being here, Chike.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you just for having this space to have these types of conversations. We don't have enough of them. So just thank you for what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. I agree. And selfishly, I love kind of nerding out on these topics. And it's what we spend every day, talking about and thinking about. And I know you have had a particularly diverse and impressive background spanning a lot of different things from, second grade teacher in New Jersey, I believe.
New York, New York, not
New York. Okay. But the Lean On Me school, is that?
Yeah, right near the school that Lean On Me is based on in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
Okay. To Chief Innovation Officer, of course, U.S. Department of Labor. So maybe let's start by just sharing a little bit about your journey and how maybe your past experiences have shaped your understanding of the future of work and leadership.
It's a big and it's a broad question, I think for me, usually when I start these conversations, people kind of ask kind of the road I've walked. I always start from, in some ways, before I was born. In many ways, the things I care about are rooted in the road that my family has walked to this moment. And so, when I say to people who don't know anything about me and my family, I say, look, my family is from a far and out-of-the-way village in Nigeria that most Nigerians themselves will never go to, never see, and never visit. None of my grandparents went past middle school. My parents were born and grew up on streets that were unpaved then. They're unpaved now. They had Peace Corps volunteers in their classrooms. And what changed for them was, changed life for them, rather, is that they got golden tickets to come and study here in the United States of America, public universities. And I am the first person in the entire history of my family born in America. And I, up until the end of April, served an American president. And so when I think about that road, I'm not where I am now because I was better and more deserving or smarter. The coin of fate kind of fell in my favor. And so I've tried to replicate the opportunity for others that has been given to me by no fault or action or any type of deserving of my own. And one of my theories of the case is one of the things that made this journey possible for my family and for me is the availability of economic opportunities through skills and education. And so that's been kind of one of my theories of the case. If my family, that changed life for my family, I believe it can change the lives of others' families. And so that's why I've done a lot of what I've done, starting off, as, in the largest school system in America as an official and as a teacher, teaching abroad in one of the poorest parts of Southeast Asia, my education through graduate school, my work in corporate strategy at an education technology company at the higher end level, as a nonprofit CEO working on the digital divide, mainly around getting families who had kids access to the internet so that they could do their homework. Because back in 2015, we were saying the internet is the pathway to everything, and the pandemic now proved it to us.
Sure.
Going back to the corporate space and working with organizations, yes, big blue chip companies, but also Teach for America, United Way Worldwide, the NBA to help them make the most of their leaders, working with community colleges to help reskill and upskill folks at the beginning of the pandemic. And then into this administration, I got the call for this job to be the Chief Innovation Officer at Labor on January 7th, 2021. The day after the insurrection. And if those of you who know DC at all, the Department of Labor is literally right behind the Capitol, blocked down. And so that day, January 6th, my colleagues or my to-be colleagues were locked down in that building for 10 hours watching this attack on democracy take place. We had up between 6 to 10% unemployment. We didn't know if vaccines worked back at that time. And so in some ways, one would say, like, why did you take this job at that particular moment? But in another way, particularly for what I have been given, that's when I should want to serve. And as tough as that time was, as crazy as it was, also the beginning of the presidential administration after a historic election, lots of pain and trials that went through that. that's the type of time you should want to serve. And God knows that's when I should have wanted to serve because of all that I've been given. So I believe I've been given more than I can repay. And the way that I think I can repay that is, again, that lever of change in my life and my family's life was economic opportunity through skills and education. And so that's what's led me to a lot of my things. The only other thing that I'll add is what I've learned along the way or been reinforced along the way is that no one sector or no one organization can solve this by themselves. This is a public sector, private sector, social sector problem. This is a federal, local, and state problem. This is a 51 state issue. Like, if this could be solved by any one person, this would have been fixed already.
Sure.
And so that's why this partnership is so important.
I love it. I certainly want to spend some time talking about how better collaboration and coordination between nodes in this overall network can come together to make the system operate more equitably and more effectively for certain communities and ultimately for all of us as a consequence. Before getting there and really just honing in on your story, you're kind of giving nod to this economic opportunity, the opportunity that you ultimately had, but you ultimately leaned in and seized that opportunity. Was that something that was always just really, really important in your family nucleus, using school and education as a path to be able to actualize some of that opportunity? Like, give me a sense of how important that has always been, or if there were certain things that were a catalyst that perpetuated that what seems to be continued success throughout your career.
It's a great thing. I think, again, the history of our family is pivotal. It's an organizing principle of my life. It's in many ways how I understand a lot of my world. That's always been the case. As my mom would always say to me, whenever I would complain about anything, she would remind me what the people before me have walked that road, and that I shouldn't complain because whatever I'm going through right now is leagues less difficult than what they've gone through. I think that's one. I think secondly, I am a classic Catholic school kid. I went to Catholic school for 12 years, and one of the things repeatedly that I was talking about is there but for the grace of God go I. Treat your neighbor the way that you would like to be treated. In the end, take care of those who can't take care of themselves, and that ethos of service, that is that's the assignment that we all are given. It looks different for different people, but if all you do is get rich, be comfortable, you've wasted the opportunities that you've been given. And that was really always reinforced to me by the nuns and the priests that I used to kind of go to school with. I think the third piece, and this is probably, I think, particularly to young people, definitely to me as a young man, is I sought challenge. That's just a thing about me. The worst thing to tell me is that I can't do something. And so I've generally tried to seek out things that I thought were difficult. One, because part of it is that you want to see if you can do it. But secondly, we don't have enough people doing hard things in the world. If we did, the world would look different. And so I think that was really, really important to me. And so when you combine that, I think that the road that my family has walked, that desire to serve and that desire to do hard things, you roughly get, I think, that. And I'll say a fourth thing, which is, and maybe this I think also comes from I'm the child of immigrants. There's something about picking up and leaving everything to come to a new place. There's a degree of audacity and chutzpah, and I think that was passed on to me. And so if you look at a lot of the things I've done, they've usually been the first time I've done this. I don't run from discomfort. Not just because it's what I've always seen modeled. And I think that's important. And in some ways, whether it was the first teaching for the first time in Best Eye Brooklyn, whether it was running a nonprofit for the first time, I'd never been a CEO before, whether it was my first time in government, I think being able to kind of, as my old boss, General McChrystal, would say, run toward the sound of the guns rather than run away is something I have. And that, I think, is kind of what's led me down the road that I've walked.
I love that. I love that. It's like, as we progress throughout our career, fortunately, we start to earn experiences that demonstrate to us our ability and aptitude to be able to deal with challenges, overcome obstacles, and ultimately become stronger as a result of that. I think what's interesting that you just articulated, how in some cases we can use the experiences, achievements, overcome challenges that are, people that came before us have experienced it and ultimately overcome as a way to demonstrate and inspire our own ability to do that, at least until you've been able to do some of those things for yourself. That's super, super interesting. Also, and now it's kind of making more sense when I think about your experience, which really spans both, public and private sectors in a really meaningful way, and local and global to a meaningful extent. You've talked about some of the values that have, ultimately the willingness and desire to serve, to be challenged and step up to those challenges. It makes sense why that wouldn't be limited to a particular vertical necessarily. That could, of course, be applicable to a number. Those are the values, the kind of compass they're using. Are there particular skills that have been, most useful for you to navigate these evolving and diverse workspaces?
It's a great question. Someone asked me this kind of, it's the what's your superpower question.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. I always say, the problems that I'm going to solve over the course of my life and career are in this future of work and economic opportunity space because of whence I come. The things that I had an old boss when I worked at the advisory board, and one thing he said to me is he said, look, you're up to the age of 30, your job is to fill in weaknesses. Your job is to figure out what you're not great at and fill them in. And this was his formulation, and you can quibble with it a little bit, but then he said around the age of 30, you kind of are who you are. And at that point, you should do what you're best at. He actually would go as far as to say, any second you spend working on things you're not the best at, 2-3 standard deviations better at than the population, is a destruction of value. And he's like, after that time, those things that you're weak at, you're going to be weak at them. And the way you fill the weaknesses is not with yourself. You fill them with a team. And ideally, when you get to that point where you know what you're good at, you also accept the things you're not good at, and you accept you can't do it, whatever it is, on your own. And so if you were to ask me my superpowers, the things that generally I'm best at, enjoy the most, one, I'm a very classic strategy guy. I've done strategy more than once as a consultant, as a corporate guy. I am the guy who will stop the meeting and say, wait, what is it that we are here to do? The old Yogi Berra quote, for those who love the yogiisms, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. And it's true. And it's
so
true. So where are we going? Then secondly, I enjoy communication. And it's interesting. In some ways, it's counterintuitive. I have a very aggressive speech impediment. I've had one since I was a kid. I took speech therapy for years. Hereditary stutter. My mom has it. My grandpa had it. And I had to work harder than most people to communicate. And in some ways now it's ironic because I do it a lot. But
Totally.
in some ways it's a weakness that I had to force into a strength. The third piece, and I think it's because of the heterodox nature of my upbringing as well as my career, I'm a partnership guy. I'm someone who, on my best days, I get people to work together who don't normally work together. And ironically, the problems of the size I like to work on require that. And so those are things I think I'm good at. And all those other things that I'm not good at, for example, most people who know me know I will always turn paperwork in late. I will. I'm just not great at it. I hate it. So I will always have like a strong COO who, like, think about like the strong COOs, who are just so detail oriented, and not just, they love it. Like
Yes.
that, those people, like, and I can name them in my life, are amazing. And so, just as one thing. So I think, in terms of my superpowers, that's what, strategy, communication, partnership,
Sure.
and then probably broad execution. Really, that's what I'm good at. And then having the humility, you have to pair that with the humility that the other stuff, I'm not 2 or 3 standard deviations at. Shoot, I might be below the beat on those things. You fill that in with a team. And then being willing to empower that team. And this is what I learned from Stan McChrystal. Your job as a leader, he's called leader as gardener. Your job is, if you think about the team you lead as a garden, your job as the leader is to clear out the weeds, clear out the obstacles, clear out the brush, clear out the rocks so that they can grow. And
I love it.
And if you put that together with what you're good at, and what your job is as a leader, lots of times when I was in government, my best days were finding usually really committed career public servants who had great ideas that no one had listened to previously, And I would say, what can I take out of your way? Similarly, when I think about the best really young people who I got to work with, a lot of the times it was, how do I take the reins off? How do I clear stuff out of your way so that you can grow? And they would do things that generally you couldn't imagine. At times, stuff goes wrong. That happens.
Sure.
But as a leader, someone, a great old professor of mine, he said, what's hard is before you become the leader, your job is the job of the organization. And then when you become the leader, your job is no longer the job. Your job is to help other people do the job. And that's a hard challenge for people to shift, because they were excellent at doing the job. Is why they became the leader. And also requires a sublimation of ego, because now it's not your job to do everything. And so,
right.
Again, I always say on my best days, because we all fail on certain days to only live up to that. But that's those kind of the values. And the other thing that I will say that probably comes just from my own faith and my own upbringing is I'm a big believer in dignity. I am a big believer in there's a school of thought that, if you're great at something, you can treat people badly. I don't believe that. It's the one thing I will fire people for immediately. You do not treat your colleagues badly. Even when they screw up, I'm a big believer in you take them aside. People keep their dignity. You treat people that way. And it's a Sunday school value. That's the term that I use. But it's important, and it's odd to me at times. You have to remind people of that.
I couldn't agree more. Work can be more than something that you do between weekends, and you're just anticipating until 5 p.m. hits. Ultimately, I've never looked at work that way. I think it's one of the unique opportunities we have to express ourselves and challenge ourselves and grow. It's just such a powerful conduit when you don't look at it as purely a means to an end. I think one of the most, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur, for better or worse, in my entire career. And one of the most challenging kind of transitions you just perfectly articulated was really going from being all the time the solution, right? The one that gets in, rolls up their sleeves and gets things done, to being more of, truly a CEO, not just in kind of name only, but functionally. I think ultimately, at least how it's helpful for me, it's like the most important job that I have, is at least as it relates to leadership within the team, is to first assemble and develop the best possible team, and then facilitate the guidance and resources that allow them to be as successful as they can be. It's like everything that goes into that, and kind of that reminder of I'm more of a coach than I am, the player. It can be challenging at times not to jump right in. But that was that was an important unlock for me and even our leadership team.
I'll say the analogy that someone made to me was I have two kids. My son is 6 and my daughter's a year and a half. And in some ways, leadership is like parenting. Your goal when you think about kind of when your kids should leave the house, your goal is for them at some point to go out in the world and stand on their own 2 feet. If you have to do everything for them their entire lives, most of us would say you've probably not done the job. And if you think about leadership, it's the same way. In the end, of course, in the beginning, you might need to give more support than you ever have. But in the end, my job is to have you be able to go out and do the job on your own without me. And, and when I think about, ideally what I would want for my own children, that's what I want. It's hard, but
sure.
That's what you want. It was the perfect analogy when I heard this years ago when someone said that, but it makes sense. It
really clicks. It really, you're not exactly trying to, accelerate or skip to that step in a hurry. You want it to happen in the right period of time. But even from, I've always tried to operate this to some degree. I think now we do a better job of truly embodying it. But in some cases, this is going to be a relatively temporary time here. My hope is that we are creating an environment that is fulfilling, that is helping you grow, helping you develop skills and capabilities that you didn't have previously. And ultimately, it can help you continue on your journey to, actualize all the things that you want to do. To the extent you can do that here for the foreseeable future, fantastic. That's ideal. But that doesn't have to be everyone's trajectory.
And the key is, now to be pragmatic and business-like. If you and your organization become known as a place where people leave better than they came, let's say someone does depart, there's going to be people behind them saying, "Oh shoot, I see what happened to that to this person. Oh my God, they were there for this amount of time, and look where they are now. Look what they're able to do now. I want to be there."
Yes. When you think in your work at the McChrystal Group specifically, I'm a big fan of different frameworks. We use a ton internally. I did see like this kind of team of teams framework. Can you unpack that
Sure.
a little bit for
You know, I got to spend 2 years there leading the strategy vertical there. And you know, Team of Teams, which is one of my top 3 leadership books. I recommend it to everyone. It is an amazing, number one, just book and story to read, as well as a framework, you know, that we were helping clients implement across the country. But basically, I won't do it as well as he does, but I'll kind of lay out the framework. And this is really informed by his time in Iraq. The thing about 2005, 2006, when that war was going really badly. And so he arrived there as the head of what's called JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. These are Navy SEALs, Delta Force, Rangers, Green Berets, the Air Force folks, pilots called the Night Stalkers, and a number of other folks. And so he arrives, and it's not going well. You know, we're losing good men and women because of it. And what he pulled out from that was 4 values of an adaptable organization. He would say, look, we were not adapting fast enough to the changing reality on the ground. And there are 4 lessons he pulled out of that. And I'll talk about what they are and then kind of how they showed up. So he first talked about trust. We didn't have enough trust within the organization of those there. Secondly, we didn't have a common purpose. We did not have shared consciousness, and we did not have empowered execution. And I'll talk about how he saw each of those. So trust, and we define trust very specifically. Trust is the belief in the benevolence, competence, and integrity of your colleagues. Benevolence, they're good people. In competence, they can actually do their job. 3, integrity, they will do what they say they will do. And so how he saw that here is, it's funny, you think about Joint Operations Command. If you dive in, all these different parts are very different. Navy SEALs are kind of known as the cowboys. They're going to go out there and do the crazy stuff. No matter what it takes, I'm going to go in, I'm going to shoot my way out and do feats of physical daring and strength that you've never seen. Delta Force, equally physically and tactically gifted, they're known as planners. They're more judicious. They'll look, it's not going the right way, I'll pull that mission because it's not quite right. I look before, I aim before I shoot. And then all of them have their different colleagues. Both of them, for example, you know, colloquially don't think much of, you know, your Army Rangers or your Green Berets. You know, I had a friend, I had someone who was a SEAL say, there was a culture of why would I even talk to an aviator, even though they're getting you to and from the mission.
I've always wondered why that is.
Some of this is historic rivalry, some of this is culture, but also the cultures are different. Yeah, okay. So he talks about this in the book, when he would go around and he would ask each of these folks, what's the mission? You would get different answers. What are we here to do? And also, a lot of them would say, I'm doing my job. If these other guys would do their job, this thing will be fine. And he actually would say this. He would say, I've talked to all of you. All of you tell me you are hitting your targets, hitting your metrics. How are all of you hitting your metrics and we're losing? All of us are losing. That's not possible. And so one of his big things was he started doing these rotating placements. I'm going to place a SEAL with a Green Beret unit. I'll place a Green Beret unit with a Delta Force unit. Now I'm going to rotate and create. He actually made these liaison networks of different people working with folks who are in different ranges. Number one, to actually share information. I'll come to that later. But secondly, to create that trust. Now that I've seen Bob, who was in a different unit, and Bob didn't do something that I like, I'm not instantly going to assume that Bob's a bad guy. I'm going to, hey, something else happened here. Let me call Bob and talk to him. So that was one. So we got to create that trust.
There's an empathetic understanding there too that ends up happening, right?
Of course, particularly when you're talking about life and death, I have to trust this person. So, it's true in any organization, but we're talking about true life and death. I got to trust you. Secondly, common purpose. Everyone was saying a different mission. That's a problem. We have to say, and I'm sure if we go to your organization, and I used to say this in my strategy group, and if I were to go and pull 5 different people from your organization and ask them, what is the mission of this organization? What would they all say to me?
It'd be perfect. They'd all say the same thing.
No, but when I asked that for leaders and organizations, they would cringe because they would say, oh my God, I don't know what they would say. So Sam McChrystal said, our mission is credibility. Our mission is to make sure that these Iraqis believe that we are here to protect them and make their country better. That's our mission. Okay. Now, one of the other things he saw was you have a force spread across the entire country. And he would say this a lot. Everyone needs to know what everyone knows.
Yes.
So he used to this legendary conference call. Initially, this conference call was for anyone who wanted to listen, but he had 400 required invitees. It was 90 minutes every day. That call grew to 8,300 people across that country every day.
Wow.
Because that was where people would share information. They said, if I go on this call, I'm going to hear what's going on. Most people didn't say anything, but this is where I knew I could get information and get people on the same page. And he would do it every day. And he said, I'm going to take these 90 minutes of everyone's time because now I can do the last thing, which is empowered execution. Meaning, he would say it this way. If you are a commander of a SEAL unit in Nangarhar province and you have the enemy in your sight, I'm in Baghdad. I don't know if you should go after it. But if you know the mission, if you have trust with your colleagues, if I've shared all the information with you, I can trust you to make the call. Now, there are some big rules. For example, he would always say this when he was in Afghanistan. If you're in Nangarhar province and you want to go to Pakistan, you have to call me first. On that. Beyond those kind of really big and simple rules, I'm going to trust. And I always use this very powerful stat. When they instituted kind of that framework, they went from 3 to 4 successful raids a month against insurgents in Iraq, getting 3 to 4 successful raids a month. When they went to that whole framework, particularly empowered execution, they went to 300 to 400 successful raids a month.
Wow.
Trust. I trust my colleagues. We all know and agree on what the mission is. And under that, I also know what my role is and what your role is. Everyone knows what everyone knows. We share information ruthlessly, relentlessly, on a regular basis, or as my boss would say, at the speed of the fight. Again, that was daily. Forcefully. I, sitting in the green zone, am not as well placed to make decisions as you who are in the field. You push decision-making down to the lowest appropriate level versus, which is what most organizations do, I push it up as high as I can so people don't have to hold accountability for making the call. Because you're not sure, I trust everybody, you're not sure if everyone knows the mission, and you are usually sure that everyone doesn't know what everyone knows. So that is on my best days, what I've tried to implement in organizations that I've worked in and led since I got to work with them. And I would love to say that I did pieces of that by instinct in other places, but when you get to work for a great leader like that, read him, work, see him implement these in other types of organizations, it's been really powerful. And even when I think about now, when I stepped into government, when I think about the things that I may do now and next, I literally start off with those frameworks in my head as far as how you start. So it's a long explanation. Definitely, if the big guy was here, he would do it far better. But that's a framework that I take, and Team of Teams is always on one of these shelves behind me, but I recommend it to everyone. Number one, it's unbelievably well written, but a few simple ways to think about leadership that I think are really powerful in any type of organization.
You did a great job articulating that. I feel inspired. I want to spend a whole nother conversation just talking about that. I'm certainly going to read the book. Maybe I'll do that first, and then I'll ask you for another chat. So we're talking about inside an organization, how some of these things work, but also how it works in terms of, working with folks outside of that organization, various stakeholders, maybe partner organizations. I would imagine, particularly the public sector work or the work with the Burning Glass Institute or maybe comparable organizations, there is a lot of convening between different constituents. I guess this feels like a broad question as well, but I'm just really curious how a mind like yours is thinking about this. I've seen a little bit firsthand of how challenging that can be. When you think about the challenge that, we're all facing in terms of, how the future of work is changing, how jobs will change, et cetera, and you're trying to coordinate between companies, communities, educational institutions, How do you all go about doing that currently with this particular challenge and problem? And then we can kind of double click in some areas, but curious broadly first.
It's a great question. It's first, if you imagine convening as getting the right people around a table, the first thing is creating the table. How do you create a space by which people of different mindsets, interests can come together in a way that feels safe, where they are primed to collaborate? That's important. When I was in government, in many ways, at times we served as that table. And in some ways, some of my biggest roles in government were actually not even to impose or say anything, but like, I've created a table that people feel like they need to come to and that they feel like they can speak at adequately or in ways that are safe and productive. So how do you create that table? And table I use as a metaphor for how you kind of get these folks together. Secondly, it's you need to agree on a common story and agree on a common opportunity. So when I think about, one thing that I spent a lot of my time in the administration thinking about, as well as now, is, and I kind of frame it this way, which is, look, we as an administration, but also as an endogenous economy, are investing a lot in jobs of the future, whether it be infrastructure, green technology, semiconductor fabrication. I was a liaison to the National Space Council to look at what's happening with SpaceX, Blue Origin, Boeing, Northrop, Lockheed. We got a lot of work that needs to get done. We also have a lot of people who need work that we have historically overlooked and underserved. And what's great is these two problems solve each other. We got people who need to work. We got work that needs to get done. And, whether it be C-suites, whether it be folks in the civic space, we got to bring these together. And generally when I was assisted, no matter who I said to, they were like, yeah, no, that makes sense. That may seem trivial, but it's really important. We all, as my wife would say, we all have to agree the sky is blue. We all have to agree that grass is green. But it sounds trivial, but it is so important. We have to come with the same story. Thirdly, now it's okay, who does what?
Yes.
And this is where I think, this is where you as a convener is very important. I think in some ways, you've got to figure out beforehand. I always believe before the meeting, you got to get, there's always the meetings before the meeting. You've got to make sure that people are primed to give what they can give uniquely and specially. And in some ways, you also have to make sure that they give it versus you take it, if that makes sense. Hey, where we are in the, where we are in this future of work conversation, we're trying to fill, let's say I'm Poughkeepsie, New York. Micron is going to build a semiconductor fabrication plant there. And just for those of you who don't know, a semiconductor fabrication plant costs as much to build as a nuclear power plant. It is the size of a city block. It is it's $10 billion to build and then to run thousands of jobs. And by the way, semiconductors are one of the most important things in our economy today. I put it right up there with oil because they power every piece of electronic equipment that we have in our economy. And they are becoming a theater of geopolitical competition between us and rivals across the world. They're building that thing. They're going to invest $100 billion across that entire development.
Wow.
They don't know where all the workers are going to come from to fill that, to fill those jobs. Okay, Micron, you are already building it. Great. You should know what the jobs are. You should know what the skills are. Now, higher ed, okay. If higher ed can listen and if Micron can be clear about what they want, now let's start to train. Shoot, but we need the workers. Who are those groups in communities who actually have relationships to say, hey, look, this is not just some other training program I'm sending you to. You're going to get a job at the end of this. So on and so forth. Because a lot of people, frankly, in community, I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland, a lot of people have been told that song and dance before. Train for this and there'll be a job for you. And at the end, there was no job. And so everyone's kind of got their piece to give. You've got to create the table. You've got to agree on the narrative. You've got to kind of prime folks beforehand. Hey, I think you might be able to do this. And then have them volunteer that themselves. And then the last piece, which I find, is you need a degree of collaboration that is uncomfortable. And here's what I mean by that. I'll use it in this context. I at times say companies in the workforce development space have a Domino's pizza approach. Mainly being like, hey, I need 90 welders and fabricators in 3 months. I'll pick them up. Same way I pick up a pizza. I want pepperoni and mushroom. I'll come and get it in 30 minutes. No. To do this well, companies you have to make the pizza with higher education. The folks who actually do this well, you have companies and higher ed just talking every week as they're designing, every week as communications are, hey, how's it going? How'd this module go? Hey, I did this thing, it didn't work. Okay, cool, change it that way in real time. And then now let's talk to another space. Let's talk to generative AI. Generative AI is moving so fast that you have to have that level of collaboration.
100%.
The job prompt engineer did not exist, I would argue, 10 months ago.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, 10 months from now, there'll be in a bunch of other jobs that didn't exist.
No doubt.
So there's no way that we can prepare people for those jobs to the ways that companies need without that level of uncomfortable collaboration.
Are you seeing with educational institutions and that collaboration, traditional educational institutions, higher ed, et cetera? So it sounds like in certain circumstances, you are seeing that level of bidirectional collaboration, whether it's with employers who are articulating a future demand or maybe even an imminent and immediate demand. You're seeing some level of collaboration. Is that broadly? Are you seeing that broadly across a lot of institutions? Is there just few? Like, how are you seeing that? Generally?
Here's what I find. I'm optimistic in that I think everyone sees the desire for this collaboration. I think not everyone quite knows how, because we've not had it historically. And I'll use an analogy. There's an old cartoon that I've seen, which is it's a cartoon of a guy on a stage giving a lecture to a big audience, and he says to the audience, "Who wants change?" And everyone raises their hand. Yeah. Who wants to change? No hands go up. So then when you have the conversation about, hey, I need you to do this differently, that's where the rub comes, and that's the hard piece. And then also there's the knowledge piece. But I think right now, at least in the workforce space, really for these jobs that are growing dramatically, that are really be, I think, the theater of economic and geopolitical competition, the need is so great. The technology field has been here for 15 years. They don't have enough of anything. It's why I think folks in the technology space have been willing to, frankly, hire returning citizens. They have invested in huge partnerships that he never would have before, because they're like, I don't have the people. I have purchase orders that I can't ship because I don't have enough people. And you're seeing this now in tons of other spaces. So I think right now, because the need is so high that it's happening, but I think we're not at full optimization as far as the effectiveness of those partnerships. A lot of fits and starts, a lot of false starts. But I think the key is the will. As long as there's will, we can get it right. And I also think as long as we agree on, again, work that needs to be done, people who need work, and let's put them together to solve each other, I think we will be okay. And the job of leaders, in some ways, is the storytelling piece. This is the story, guys. Remember, this is the story.
Yeah.
Sky is still blue. The grass is still green. Water is still wet. Yeah.
I totally agree. The incentives in the system, at least on the simplest level, are right. There's jobs to be done. There's a demand for, people and skills ultimately that are required in order to grow the business. And there are people who, want to be able to fulfill those needs. It's like, how can we help create a better conduit, better communication, better collaboration, while acknowledging some of the friction associated with some of these sides of that equation having to change the way things have historically been done. You brought up AI. Obviously that's a hot topic. It's an exciting time, certainly for someone like myself who's been in the technology space the majority of my career. How are you seeing AI and this kind of revolution it's driving? What impact are you seeing that have on jobs and the way that organizations operate?
That's a big question.
I like big questions. Apparently.
No, and it's the right question. The way I see it is our task with generative AI specifically, but broadly with most emerging technologies, I spent time in administration on quantum, on XR. It's the same question. How do you capture the promise and mitigate the peril? Capture the promise, mitigate the peril. There's a ton of peril mitigation. One, there's the basic things around privacy, scaling of bias, things like that, things that were always around with technology, but because of the speed and scale of generative AI and the way it's going to be part of everything, it already is becoming part of everything, we have to get that right. We have to get it right quickly. So that's one piece. Secondly is kind of the broad job displacement challenge.
Sure.
And there are two schools of thought here. One is the kind of techno-optimist view, which is it'll create more jobs than it destroys by far. There'll be some moving around displacement, but it's going to be fine. Then you have to have the techno-doomsayers who say it's going to destroy everything. You guys don't understand. This time is different. They're both right and they're both wrong. In the sense of, no, there will be some jobs that are at risk from generative AI. It'll be jobs we generally don't expect. You're in the technology space. I've been in that space for a while, but I'm probably not as technical as you. But this rise of no code programming, which I'm seeing people use in real time. I'm seeing nonprofit heads who can't afford to hire someone to do their website do it through a ChatGPT, which has never happened before. I forget, ChatGPT just rolled out a new feature. I forget what it's called. But I was a consultant, and I watched this tool produce a market size analysis with beautiful graphs that I used to spend 3 days on as a management consultant. And then definitely go to some of the repetitive tasks, so on and so forth. So there's that piece. There's also, which I worry about in the short term, which I think is an opportunity, that in the short term, the issue is going to be people with AI skills will obviate those who don't. I would argue that I think in the next 12 to 24 months, ChatGPT or Bard or any of the other tools are going to be like Google search. If you wouldn't hire someone who didn't know how to use Google search, you'd be like, you can't, this will be that very shortly. And so my thing, which now gets to the opportunity, how do we get the workers who need work the most, the jobs, the skills, the most in-demand work, I think that's an opportunity, whether it be returning citizens, immigrants, people in rural communities, or low-income communities. And that's a benefit to all of us. What's the promise? The promise to me is there are things, again, I'll just use that one example. You think about small businesses in America. Think about businesses that are under 50 people. They're under 10 people, which is still the majority of businesses. They can't, where the CEO is the CFO, they sweep the floor, sure. They hire folks. I met a small business owner in my home county who used ChatGPT to write an employee manual. They would have hired someone to do that. But they don't have first of all, they didn't have the money for that. So they just wouldn't have written one, to be very honest.
There you go.
So they just wouldn't have written one. They wrote one that was pretty good. They still have to edit it and so on and so forth. But the time compression on that task was revolutionary for their business. And so those types of places, particularly in the non-Fortune 2000 parts of our economy that can't afford to go out and get these things that would normally be outsourced, I think is really powerful. And so again, this is where I think we got to work together as a society, from government, business, the social sector. How do we grow that promise piece and mitigate through intelligent legislation, through partnership, through good implementation, the peril? Because the peril's real. Both are real.
Totally.
And I think probably the parts of this conversation that I lament are at times people on both sides of this try to argue the other side's not real. No, it is real. Both are real. There is danger and there is unbelievable promise, but we've got to do both. And also, neither one is going to happen by itself. I think that there are times they'll say the doom's going to happen no matter what we do. The optimistic scenario will happen no matter what we do. No. It's dependent upon our choices. And we have to make those choices really starting right now, to be honest, really starting yesterday.
I am 1,000% with you. I guess on that, I know we're approaching time here. Just to kind of leave the audience with young leaders out there who, maybe haven't been utilizing or as familiar with AI. Maybe they've toyed around with ChatGPT, but they're young leaders within organizations. They, are trying to stay with the times. They're trying to upskill. They're overwhelmed and have a lot of things going on. Is there anything that you would kind of leave them with that you think would be helpful for young leaders out there?
Let me say a couple, some really tactical things, and then I think some bigger things. I think if you've not taken Balas Dar's generative AI certificate course on LinkedIn, go take it. It's great. Balas Dar runs the Patrick McGovern Foundation, an amazing certificate program, number one on generative AI, but also on how we incorporate ethics into how we use that. Secondly, there are tons of great courses on the mechanics of it. And I think we need to treat everyone needs to know about AI, whether you intend to have that be your career or not. The same way that everyone should know that the Earth goes around the sun, that gravity, that the speed of gravity is, I think it's 9.8 meters per second squared. I'm a little far away from physics, but there are these basic things that we should all know, and AI and also other emerging technologies. I think everyone should know the theory of what a qubit is. Everyone should know the basis of XR. I just believe that because you will be, even if you're not working on it, you will be impacted by it.
Totally.
So I think that's just tactically, but more broadly, I think it goes out back to some of the things that we talked about. One, understand why you do what you do. Whether it's a personal story, it's an experience that you had, understand it, be able to talk about it. One, make your values clear in your own mind, one. But secondly, it brings teams and people to you. Secondly, be really clear on what you're good at and be clear on what you're not, and have the humility to bring the team around you, even if they're not the formal leader, to solve that thing. The last piece is it's this piece on dignity, not just the people on your team and in your company, but, I have this belief that, America, the world, we're a team. We are a team. And think about what am I doing that is increasing the dignity of everyone who's on that team, whether it be in my community, whether it be in a place all around the world that I may never go to and never visit. Because, again, I think about it. There are actions that, I'll just tell this one quick story. I was part of a fellowship program years ago, and I got to meet the daughter of Lyndon Baines Johnson, who's now probably 75. And I went up to her afterward and I said, ma'am, I can't thank your father, so I'm going to thank you. Your father helped pass 2 pieces of legislation that impacted my family, even though he wouldn't know it. One of them was the Higher Education Act, which helped fund public higher education in this country. My parents both went to them and probably wouldn't have been able to go without that support. The other is the Immigration and Naturalization Act, which basically lifted all these quotas on countries like in sub-Saharan Africa that allowed people to come to the United States and study. Without those 2 pieces of legislation, I would not be here. Bluntly. He never met my parents, didn't know them, couldn't tell them from Adam and Eve. But because of what he did, that increased, that I was saying, for the dignity of mankind, I'm sitting here having this conversation with you. And all of you who are listening to this will have that impact if you have that mindset. And there'll be someone that you'll never meet whose life's going to be totally different. And so as you think about your business, your career, what you do in your community, think about having that type of impact.
A rising tide lifts all ships, and you certainly, my man, are a rising tide. I had high expectations for this conversation, as is. You exceeded those for sure. I know for certain our audience, our community will appreciate and relish the advice and insight that you shared with us today. I truly cannot thank you enough. I know how busy you are, although hopefully we'll be able to have a conversation at some point in the future. Chike, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.